Now we move to House File 4449. This bill will also be laid over today. So Representative Jones, you have an A4 author's amendment after you get settled up there. Would you like to offer your A4 author's amendment?
I move my amendment.
The A4 author's amendment is in front of us. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? The motion prevails. Representative Jones, to your bill.
Thank you, Chair Tabke. Okay, good. I know how this works, maybe. Uh-oh, did I just break it? Okay. Thank you, Chair Tabke and Chair Koznick and members of the Transportation Committee to the opportunity to present House File H4449, what I'm calling Transit for Resilient Metro. So I actually want to start high level and ask three main questions. Do we want a growing Twin Cities, a metro that can compete with peers, and a place where businesses and residents can thrive? Hopefully to these questions, we're all saying yes. And even if you don't live in the metro, when the metro does well, it helps the whole state do well. So I hope we can agree that having transportation in order to make these things move helps build a bigger and greater metro. So we need reliable, affordable, and accessible transportation options to be able to get there. And it's no secret that most transportation used in the metro is by car. Cars should and will always be an option in Minnesota. But we have to acknowledge that there are some challenges. First, 1 in 3 Minnesotans cannot or does not have a car due to age, ability, cost, accessibility, or choice. That includes 1 in 5 seniors. This includes kids who want to get to friends' houses, school, sports, or the ice cream shop. This includes my friend who's in his 30s. He looks completely able-bodied, but epilepsy keeps him from being able to get a driver's license. All of these people matter. The other thing is that vehicle costs are increasing. The average new car costs $50,000. And Trump's ill-considered war is driving gas costs up with no relief in sight. Another thing is that a growing metro population requires us to be more efficient with the way we use our space. This image on the screen there shows 60 people in different modes of transportation and how much space that those 60 people would take up riding a bus, riding a bike, or driving in cars. Oops. So this bill creates a foundation to build the confidence and cost effectiveness in the transit system and to grow it to reach the needs of more people, because we need more options, and transit is a great one for that. Diving into the details, I see 3 important issues that are holding us back. One is a lack of numeric goals for Twin Cities metro area transit system. The second one is inefficient coordination of road construction and transit projects. And the third one is inadequate tools for building a more effective transit system. And this bill seeks to address all 3 of these. So the first one, lack of numeric goals. So let's set some goals. The first one is to really pair ridership and frequency, because we know when frequency increases, it drives and improves ridership. So let's establish targets for residents with access to that establishes targets for residents with access to high-frequency transit. So that means that over time, we want to increase the number of residents who have access to those fast buses and trains. The second one would establish average operating costs per passenger service per hour. And this would demonstrate effectiveness and drive confidence in the system. And the third metric would really help us get there faster, get people to places faster with transit by establishing speed and reliability metrics. The second issue is inefficient coordination of road construction projects and with transit projects. So this actually came to me in my own district. Lyndale Avenue is a road in my district. It's being reconstructed by the county next year. It's also on Metro Transit's plan tentatively for a BRT project in the next 5 to 7 years. Well, it doesn't make sense to tear up the road in next year and then tear it up again in 5 to 7 years to put in the BRT project. So what we need is earlier knowledge of planned transit in a corridor so that cities, counties, and the state can better incorporate those transit elements into the projects as they're tearing up the road at that time. So the proposed solution, let's tear up the road only once. And we do that by creating a transit investment framework with accountability. So for those of you who are familiar with Metro Transit's current transportation policy plan, there is a framework that lays out what are the projects that we want in the Metro going forward. The problem is it's kind of just been a wish list. And that's not to anyone's particular fault. That's just because of how funding and the incentive structure has existed in the past couple decades. And so now that transit funding is more stable, especially the operational funding, we can start to think more concretely about how do we build a comprehensive, holistic network. But we have to have accountability mechanisms with it. So this framework would essentially create a map of corridors where we want in the region to have transit. And this is incorporated as a part of the Regional Development Guide. That essentially happens every 10 years. And just as it currently exists, there is an amendment process to allow necessary changes in between. That accountability mechanism comes in where it requires money that is spent on a substantial construction project along a corridor planned for transit to support the alignment of that transit need. So if we go back to that Lyndale Avenue example, because it's being built or reconstructed next year, it would make sense if we could just upgrade those bus shelters, those bus stations with that project instead of waiting 5 to 7 years, upgrading them then and having to tear up the road, inconveniencing everyone along that corridor. The way this would work is that noncompliance with this provision would be determined by a committee, and the members are spelled out in the bill. And the results would be that any noncompliance would be the funding reallocation to transit supporting pots of funding. And I will note that I've been in conversations with basically all levels of government, state, county, city, and continue to want to explore how are we going to make this implementable. The third issue is inadequate tools for building a more cost-effective system. So transit is most cost-effective when we have lots of ridership, right? And when there's more ridership when there are people nearby the transit stations. So a good example is the Green Line. I ride the Green Line most days to get here. It's a fantastic transit. What could have been better was how quickly we were building the developments around those transit stops. So the picture on the right just shows that there was construction that didn't happen until 6 years after the stations were built. So it was kind of a missed opportunity for ridership for those first 6 years. So the proposed solution, so transit-oriented development is already a policy that Metro Transit and Met Council pursue. However, they can only incentivize it right now. What this bill does is it allows Met Council to buy and own property in order to develop that land as they see fit in order to support that transit-oriented development. So they could have an RFP in order to let the private market, bid and develop that, or they can develop it themselves. It gives that flexibility, but really it's just giving it an allowance there. So that is my bill, and I stand for questions.
Thank you very much, Representative Jones. We have a couple of amendments that we will get to first and then have discussion about the bill. Representative Olson, A3 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to move I think it's the A2 amendment, which is all about the prohibition does not apply to highway projects that are predominantly designed to address a documented safety issue. I think that whereas this bill has the best of intentions, there are some unintended consequences that I think that would result from an implementation of this. One of those biggest concerns of mine has and continues to always be the safety of our drivers, the safety of our pedestrians and our bikers, people out on the road. And if we are forcing communities to build a new bus stop or create a new bus lane in order to address a safety concern, we're talking about a substantial increase in the cost that this project would make to save people's lives or to potentially increase the safety of an area. And so my biggest concern is the idea of safety among people on the streets. And in order to do that, I want to make sure that we can have a conversation that includes making sure communities don't have to spend $85,000 for a new bus stop in order to put a stoplight up or to change an intersection, ensuring that they don't have to create potentially a $500,000 bus lane in order to save people's lives. So that's the entire intention of this amendment that I'm bringing forward, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Olson, for bringing this. I think you raise an important point, and I'd be happy to continue talking to you about this because it is really important to me, too, that all of our residents and people on our streets are safe. The intention of this bill is really to get at those major construction projects, so really we're digging into we're changing out the concrete. And so when we're already spending that amount of money, like we should be incorporating all of those pieces at the same time. And so while I support the intention behind this, I don't support the amendment as it currently stands.
Closing comments, Representative Olson.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that we need to ensure that safety remains paramount to everything that we do here. And I think that, I guess, maybe the new amendment that Representative Jones brought in may in fact have some of those numbers that I was looking at, because you're talking major projects. I guess I didn't see that in the original bill, that you're outlining, something that costs $15 million or whatever, because that's a major project in the metro area. I didn't see that. But I think that as a result, we need to establish that safety remains an issue, remains a focal point of our committee. And as such, Mr. Chair, I would ask for a roll call on this amendment.
Oh, Representative Olson, I was just going to ask if, since Representative Jones agreed with you that she would like to continue working on this bill is being laid over and not moving forward today. There's still lots of time to work on things as things go. She agrees with you and wants to make this happen. And do you want to withdraw the amendment, or do you want a roll call on the amendment?
Well, I think that, Mr. Chair, if the author of the amendment or the bill is accepting of the concept of working on this amendment, we could adopt the amendment and then we could work on it backwards, moving forward and then stepping back, as opposed to staying where we are and then trying to move forward. So I'd appreciate this amendment to be voted on.
Okay. Roll call having been requested, please take the roll.
Chair Tapke.
No.
Chair Tapke, no. Chair Kosnick.
Kosnick, aye.
Kosnick, aye. Vice Chair Ream.
No.
Ream, no. Vice Chair Myers. Aye. Myers, aye. Representative Anderson.
Aye.
Anderson, aye. Representative Fogelman.
Aye.
Fogelman, aye. Representative Green.
No.
Green, no. Representative Jones.
No.
Jones, no. Representative Joy. Yes. Joy, aye. Representative Cagle. No. Cagle, no. Representative Kraft.
No.
Kraft, no. Representative Lugar Nicolai.
No.
Lugar Nicolai, no. Representative Murphy. Yes. Murphy, yes. Representative Olson.
Yes.
Olson, yes. Representative Sensimiro.
No.
Sensimiro, no. Representative Scraba.
Aye.
Scraba, aye. Mr. Chair, the ayes are 8, the nays are 8.
With 8 ayes and 8 nays, the motion does not prevail. A3 amendment, Chair Kosnick.
Thank you. Great job presenting, a big concept. I think there's some merit to some of the stuff. One of the big things, though, is what this amendment will do, and I would move the A3 amendment for the record, is allows local cities to have more input, local elected officials to have the voice of their constituents and to look at individual projects, because projects may be vastly different or certain unique characteristics may come up. And so allows a local city to, by resolution, offer an opt-out of these requirements. Or if the local city wants more broader input, they can put it on a referendum at a general election, and then their constituents in that particular city can weigh in if there's a particular issue that needs to be addressed or have more input on. And so what this does is allows local control for electeds to have input and say, and also for local taxpayers and citizens that would hopefully be using the transit development in there. So that is the A3 amendment, kind of wrote over it, A3 amendment, and I would request a roll call as well.
Roll call has been requested. Representative Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Tapke, and thank you, Co-Chair Kosnick, for bringing this. I think you raise an important point about essentially where do we want future transit? And The reason for pairing both the metrics as well as the transit investment framework in this bill is that we want the metrics to be driving us essentially to the places where transit is desired. And so in some ways, the way we do that is by land use. And cities have this jurisdiction of determining land use. And so they're effectively signaling where they want transit by saying, yeah, we're going to have a lot of people here. And so it makes a lot of sense to put transit there. So essentially, if cities are not interested in transit, they won't do that type of land use planning. And so it would not make sense for that to end up into the transit investment framework. And the other part about the transit investment framework, it is part of an engagement process that, similar with the TPP, the Transportation Policy Plan, it is a region-wide stakeholder process. And so I don't see this honestly as becoming so much of an issue because cities will already be indicating with their land use that they want transit. And so I don't necessarily see the need for this amendment.
Final comment, Chair Koznick.
Just maybe more of a technical question. With the A4 amendment on page 2, looks like subdivision 4, 2.3 to 2.25, sets up a coordinating committee, and maybe just for my clarification and that of the committee and the public, doesn't this committee that you're setting up have a lot more influence and leeway on some of these projects, that it has to go through this committee before a project could be built? Is that right?
Representative Jones.
Thank you, Co-Chair Tabke and Co-Chair Koznick. This committee will essentially only review a project if it was raised that a project is not in alignment with, essentially that's not building transit along a corridor that was planned for transit. So it's more of a, it's not an approval. It's if something is inconsistent, then it gets discussed at that committee.
Chair Koznick.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification. Maybe that's helpful. I think we're putting a little bit more weight on this committee as opposed to the local electeds in some cases. And so, further, I have further issue with the makeup of that particular committee as well. But for the A3 amendment and sticking to that topic, I would rather trust our local electeds than the Met Council and their committee and MnDOT and all that. So I would request we adopt the A3 amendment.
Roll call has been requested on the A3 amendment.
Chair Tabke.
No.
Tabke, no. Chair Koznick.
Koznick, aye.
Koznick, aye. Vice Chair Ream.
No.
Ream, no. Vice Chair Myers. Aye. Myers, aye. Representative Anderson. Aye. Anderson, aye. Representative Fogelman. Aye. Fogelman, aye. Representative Green.
No.
Green, no. Representative Jones.
No.
Jones, no. Representative Joy. Joy, aye. Representative Cagle.
No.
Cagle, no. Representative Kraft.
No.
Kraft, no. Representative Lugar Nicolai.
No.
Lugar Nicolai, no. Representative Murphy.
Yes.
Murphy, aye. Representative Olson.
Yes.
Olson, aye. Representative Sensimiro.
No.
Sensimiro, no. Representative Scraba.
Aye.
Scraba, aye. Mr. Chair, the ayes are 8, the nays are 8.
The motion does not prevail. All right, we have a few testifiers. We'll start out with Commissioner Brennan from Scott County.
Thank you. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak today. I am Jody Brennan. I'm a county commissioner representing the city of Shakopee on the Scott County Board, and I represent the same area as Chair Tabke, and I'll say Shakopee's in the house today. So first I want to be fair to the authors of this bill. Today's amendments that were brought forward would have been an agreeable amendment for this bill. Scott County has transportation sales tax projects underway that our residents had voted for and are counting on us to deliver. Under this bill, any of those projects would have been found inconsistent with the transit framework that counties had limited input in writing. If that happens, the sales tax revenues those same residents voted on to dedicate to county roads gets redirected to the Metropolitan Council. No appeal and no meaningful county voice in the decisions that trigger a penalty. The safety carve-out matters, but clear documentation standards so counties can actually rely on it and not just hope for the best when the roads need urgent attention. Cities receive an opt-out mechanism under these amendments. Counties do not. That's not equitable. As for the transit-oriented development zoning mandates, not one of the amendments did touch on them. Counties and cities are still prohibited from spending on transit capital projects unless local zoning conforms to standards with a geographic scope that remains undefined. That bypasses the local elected officials and compromises plan processes our communities have spent years developing. Scott County wants to be a real partner in coordinating transit and roadway investments. We're not here to obstruct what's going on. We're here because the people I represent need both a functional transportation system and a voice in the decisions that are governing it. We ask this committee to ensure counties have meaningful influence in framework development, a genuine opt-out equivalent to what cities receive, a formal appeal process for any penalty that's informed, and a defined geographic scope for the transit-oriented development requirements before this bill moves forward. And I understand that's late over. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Next up, we'll have Commissioner Green from Hennepin County. And following that would be MJ Carpio from Move Minnesota. Commissioner Green, please introduce yourself and proceed for the rest.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Co-Chair Tabke, Co-Chair Koznick, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Marion Green, and I'm the Hennepin County Commissioner for District 3, and I'm the Chair of the Regional Railroad Authority. Thank you, Representative Jones, for bringing this forward and for this committee's attention to this important matter. Minnesotans need affordable transportation options, and that includes a robust and efficient transit network. It remains essential for our economy and family budgets. State, local, and federal investment supports high-quality transit in our region, and we must work collaboratively to deliver that high-quality multimodal network. Minnesota households are struggling to stretch their incomes to meet their needs. Transit provides an affordable option for people to access better-paying jobs, education, and opportunity. Lack of transit or inefficient transit makes driving the only choice for most Minnesotans, causing more congestion in the metro, impacting energy consumption and air quality that drives up costs for Minnesotans. Our workforce wants to live in connected communities that provide multimodal transportation options. Major employers and developers know this and locate near high-quality transit. In fact, more than 35% of development in the Twin Cities region has occurred in high-frequency transit corridors since 2005, including $13 billion near existing and planned light rail station, with more in the pipeline. Transit projects themselves create thousands of good-paying jobs in Minnesota by leveraging billions in federal funds. These jobs become strong, lasting careers that strengthen the middle class and spur reinvestment in every part of our state. So, to HF 4449. Hennepin County spent years advocating for significant transit funding at the legislature, and in 2023, the legislature made generational investments in our transportation system. Critically, this legislation added new funding to improve safety and active transportation, and dedicated transit funding to build and operate a more efficient transit system. A lot of work remains for our region to complete a regional transit network that meets our growing needs. Planners and elected officials from local, state, and federal levels must work with community and business leaders to develop and advance a vision for an integrated regional transit system to connect our communities. Counties are fundamental partners in developing this vision. House File 4449 is a good step in moving towards achieving this vision together as a region to find efficiencies and work collaboratively to meet our needs. Hennepin County would like to remain a part of this conversation and ensure there's a balanced approach and engagement with local elected leaders and community. Again, we want to thank Representative Jones for starting this important conversation and giving us a template to work on. I look forward to further conversations on this issue. Let's keep the momentum going for fast, frequent, multimodal, integrated, and accessible transit system that will carry Minnesota into its brightest future. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Commissioner. Next up, we have MJ Carpio from Move Minnesota.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Tabke, for the opportunity to testify. My name is MJ Carpio, Executive Director of Move Minnesota, and we fight for Minnesotans who want access to convenient and affordable transportation options. We know from public polling that 1/3 of Minnesotans would be more likely to use public transit if there were greater access where they lived. And we also know that 64% of Twin Cities residents say that more frequent train and bus service would make them more likely to use public transit. And as the cost burden of car ownership continues to rise, Minnesotans want to choose affordable ways to travel around their communities. And in 2023, we took that first step toward building a nation-leading transit system by establishing the long-term dedicated funding for transit. So the next natural step is ensuring that those resources that we have invested are used well to expand people's access to fast and frequent service. So HF 4449, or Transit for a Resilient Metro, it would mandate that the Met Council set transit performance measures and create an investment framework aligned with improving service, increasing ridership, and centering transit-oriented development. And so by setting clear and ambitious goals, we can ensure that our public funds are actually being used to build and maintain a high-quality public transit system that meets the needs of our communities and maybe puts us on a world stage, who knows. So the three things I wanted to highlight were the performance measures. The performance measures are progressive benchmarks to expand convenient transit, and they should increase service reliability and speed to reduce travel times for riders. They should increase the number of people with access to high-frequency service, and they should decrease the average operating cost per passenger trip. So these are all pretty progressive and ambitious goals. The second piece is the Transit System Investment Framework, which directs the Met Council to identify the expanded transit coverage and system improvements necessary to meet the performance measures. And it's great too that it's going to have it's going to continue to have community input. So that's great. And the third thing that I wanted to highlight is that we're encouraging transit-oriented development, so that transit capital projects use transit-oriented design planning, and that the Met Council will have a more active participation in developing and lands along bus, rapid transit, and light rail routes. And that's great. And I think the last thing I'll say is that this is setting an example for other agencies in Minnesota that to set performance measures and to really make sure that we're using our investments well, that we fought really hard for. So thank you again for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to testify who hasn't yet? All right, seeing none, questions for Representative Jones. Representative Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Instead of, a long back and forth of multiple different questions of me asking and then responding, and I'm just going to get them all out right away, because I've got three questions/concerns of this, whereas I think, like I said before, this bill has like the best of intentions in it. And I really like the concept of providing some metrics saying we want to decrease the cost of ridership, we want to increase utilization. That there's nothing more frustrating than driving past a city bus that's actually in service, running its route, and has no one on it. So there's nothing more frustrating than that. And so my three concerns here is, the first one, obviously safety, still a major concern since we didn't adopt that amendment. The second one is the transit routes, they're really long, and they go through all sorts of communities, all sorts of cities, and how does that affect if one of these areas or one of these communities are not complying with the plan and thus losing funding or thus being, reprimanded in some way, shape, or form? How does that affect the entire establishment of this route? So that's question two. Number three concern/question is the population density requirements that we have in this bill, in my mind, hinders the build out of transit in our metro area. You know, obviously, the way it kind of looks to me in this bill is we're pushing all the transit money into the core, and all of our suburban counties are going to suffer as a result. And I think individuals like Representative Tabke, Representative Ream are going to be hurt by this push of transit funds into the core, because that's where the population density is. So I commend you on the concept of creating a metric that we want to improve our ridership, we want to decrease the cost. But those three issues, the issues of safety, the transit routes with individuals not complying, and then the population density requirements that are going to push them into the core and take money away from the outer suburban areas that need this kind of transit just as much as anyone else. Those are the three.
I always appreciate you looking out for me. Thank you. Representative Jones.
Thank you, Chair Tabke and Representative Olson. These are great questions, so I'll maybe answer them in reverse order. So regarding the population piece, quite frankly, the urban core is pretty much already well served. We already meet those metrics. So actually, the targets that are in there are actually trying to indicate to cities that we want to serve you more, so therefore please create the land use conditions such that we can make transit more accessible to more people. Because right now, Minneapolis, St. Paul, we're already getting the high frequency transit. I want it to get to other people, and we need, the problem that we continue to face is this siloing of land use and transportation. And I'm open to other ideas of how to bridge that, but this seemed to be an option for us to get there. And so again, I'm really open to conversation. I just want us to bridge that gap. Secondly, the long routes with transit, you raise a really good point. I want this to be a starter conversation, and as I mentioned, I've been talking with every level of government, and I want to continue to be able to do that so that we can address, in my case with Lindale Avenue, it's already starting in the downtown core. It's okay if that is upgraded in terms of its bus service, but probably it doesn't make sense if it's in Bloomington and then actually the corridor, anyway, the upgrade would happen in Bloomington way before it would happen in Minneapolis, for example, without the buses actually being there. So that just needs to be a continued conversation. And the safety piece as well. Like I said, this is intended to be for the real major construction projects. And so like if there needs to be bump outs, there needs to be a light change, like that is not what is intended in this bill. And I'm happy to make changes for that.
You have a quick follow-up?
I just wanted to respond and be like, I appreciate that. I'm a logistics officer in the Army Reserve right now, and the concept of getting more people to the battlefield on the right place at the right time is something that I hold dearly, and so I appreciate the answers. I think there's a lot of work we can do to tighten things up, make it happen, but like I said, I like the idea of creating some metrics and saying, we need to make sure that we're only paying this much money per person riding this bus or riding this train, and how do we do that? And so I appreciate the intent of this. I think some of the unintended consequences need to be tightened up before we allow it to move forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We're going to do Representative Skraba, then Representative Kraft, then we're going to lay this over. So anybody else who has questions, please work with the author on that. Representative Skraba.
Thank you, Chair Tabke. Representative Jones, two questions. Safety was my first thing I wrote down when I listened to you. My first thought was like, safety has to be part of it. We're addressing that. One of the things the county commissioner from Scott County said was the opt-out, that cities get to opt out, but counties can't. And I'd like to explain that if you can. And my second question, your comment was the Met Council would just buy the land, like to coordinate the properties, like if it's all private and it's all helter-skelter, trying to get it all coordinated, and the bill here, acquisition of property for transit-oriented development, I think is that kind of in that same, what I'm talking to is, so the concern I have is in any housing, as we find out, there's always, it doesn't make money all the time. So when government gets involved in buying housing and running it, someone's subsidizing it. The federal government does a lot of HRA stuff, but it's meant for that. And how are you going to address that when you're moving all the pieces in that puzzle? Thank you,
Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative Scraba. I may, again, answer in reverse order. So this graphic may help that a little bit. So I think, we're talking about transit-oriented development, so we're trying to, or the intent would be to allow Metro Transit to essentially buy those properties adjacent to that T in the middle to be able to do mixed-use development, things like that. Right now, the bill allows flexibility, so the Metro Transit might, or Met Council might own the land, but then, just lease it out to someone to then develop, and then they run it, or it could be subsidized housing. Right now, it allows for flexibility along that continuum, and I'm open to tightening that up as makes sense. And then secondly, I honestly did not quite understand the commissioner from Scott County's point about cities being able to opt out, but counties can't. I mentioned to her I wanted to talk with her afterwards because I wanted to understand a little bit more.
All right, Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Jones, for bringing this. I want to commend you on putting this out on our agenda, this kind of long-term, very thoughtful thinking, building in accountability. I too, like Representative Olson, I really love the idea of having clear metrics, ridership accounted, so I think that's fantastic. And I think you're, pulling in high frequency is so important. And the thing I want to point out to folks is when you change over from needing to check a bus or light rail schedule to being able just to go because there's going to be one there very soon, it's a mind shift change that really drives further usage. And if you want any example of that, look at Brampton, Ontario, which has 700,000 people and like 260,000 rides a day of transit, all by focus on high frequency. So thank you for that. A question I have for you on safety. I too am extremely concerned about safety, but it is my understanding, and maybe you can refresh my memory, that if you look at transit versus more time in a car versus other things, doesn't the fact of increasing investment in transit have a significant impact on safety and reduced death because of it's just a far safer approach?
Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative Kraft. It's true, transit has one of the lowest fatality rates out of any mode of transportation.
Chair Koznick.
Thank you, and again, thank you for presenting the topic and bringing this forward. One of the things, maybe I know what your thoughts would be, but you talked about every level of government, and just kind of looking through the bill, I've been around long enough where at 3.26, 27, and 28, that language is reiterated throughout the bill, and what that language is it applies to the Met Council. That's how we define the Met Council in the 7 counties in the metro area. But talking to every level of government, if this is such a good idea, why aren't we doing it throughout the state because in the other MPOs? And I'm guessing you probably haven't talked to all the other MPOs about this. The second point was we heard from our testifiers, Hennepin County, talk about affordability, and absolutely right. People are struggling with their own personal budgets as we have other inflationary pressures, the cost of goods and services. And I just want to throw it out to the committee that there's a proposal to raise the cost of many goods and services in Hennepin County another 1%, which would mean the sales tax would be, in many cases, over 10%.
Chair Koznick, let's keep to the bill, please.
That's what I'm talking about. Talking about the testifier that testified about the bill and the affordability and.
Proceed. Just keep to the bill. Thank you.
So the point is that how does raising the cost of goods and services over 10% with the new sales tax, how does that actually achieve affordability? Because I'm going to argue that it doesn't. The third thing was, as we mentioned, the local cities and counties have concerns. The fiscal note doesn't address the cost of planning this out with and paying for some of these projects to the local cities and counties. And then finally, the other concern I have as I wrap up, Mr. Chair, Representative Jones, is the Met Council ability to purchase and take on more land development, basically, is what they would be doing. As you'd mentioned, maybe they'd buy it and lease it back, and might be subsidized housing, it might be commercial property in that. And so those are kind of some of the concerns, and in general, this basically is, maybe you would agree, putting the beginning of a 15-minute city planning type of planning and centralized planning. So a lot of people across the state, a lot of people in my community have big concerns with that. So interesting concept. I think we can do some of our planning on our transit routes better and coordinate with MnDOT in terms of some of the examples you gave of if you're putting a road in and do the utilities and all at the same time. We talked about that a little bit last year with Chair Cagle, and I think those are good things to strive to. I'm not comfortable with the overall mandates in the bill to get us there. So those are my comments. I know we're laying it over, but those would be some of the concerns that I have to oppose it if there was a vote.
Thank you, Chair Koznick. Closing comments, Representative Jones.
Thank you, Chair Tabke and Chair Koznick. To your one question about why not do this in every MPO, good idea. I hadn't thought about that. I'm just most familiar with the Metro because that's where I represent. So just closing comments, this bill is designed to really have good governance of our transit system, of our construction dollars, of our transportation dollars. And of the issues that I've laid out here, I'm really open to suggestions for how to solve it. This is one way that I've thought about and that we have been moving forward with. The other thing I want to say is actually was a quote from Chair Nash the other day. I think it was either on the floor or in State Gov that you can't manage what you don't measure. And so it's really important, I think, for our transit system that we start putting those performance measures out there. And these other pieces around transit-oriented development, this is really taking from the most successful transit agencies around the world. And so I don't like to reinvent the wheel. Let's take things that already work, and hopefully we can do that with this bill moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, House File 4449 is laid over.